It's time to talk about cancelled storylines once again. Hello guys, one more time and welcome to Ring Royalty. My name is Alexis, as you already know, and today the jean jacket is back in 2021 because we're going to talk about part 6 of cancelled storylines. Let's remember the drill very fast. First, we mentioned what was the storyline about, then we mentioned the reason why it was cancelled if it is known, and finally we talk about what could have happened if it was included on the show. So, without any further to say, let's start with this very interesting video. I have collected some very unusual and unique storylines that could have happened, and this is the moment to talk about all of them. The first storyline I'm gonna talk about is probably the oldest one on this list, and it was the feud between Lita and Chyna. As we all know, Chyna won the Women's Championship at Wrestlemania against Ivory in a monumental win with a lot of the fan support. She had been fighting for men's championships, but in 2001, she decided to go after the Women's Championship. It was a very weird change, as most people already saw Chyna as this dominant, unstoppable force in the men's division. Now she moved to the women's side, she was literally going to be unbeatable, and that happened for a while. She easily destroyed people like Molly Holly, Ivory, Trish Stratus, and that happened until Lita stepped up and challenged Chyna for the Women's Championship. This rivalry started with both of them as faces. It was very interesting to see because Lita was basically a newcomer. We have seen a couple of things that she could do. She was already extreme, but she wasn't at the level of Chyna used yet. So the cancelled storyline here is that this rivalry was supposed to last many months, but the reason why it was cancelled is because Chyna was released from WWE. As we all know, the affair between Stephanie McMahon and Triple H happened, and Chyna was basically let go of her contract out of nowhere while she was the champion, and the championship was vacant. This surprised lots of people back then, I mean for obvious reasons, but Lita recently mentioned in an interview that their match Judgment Day for the Women's Championship, that was the only one that they could have, they didn't go to 100% because as the feud was supposed to progress and the rivalry was supposed to get more heated, then they would try to beat each other up. They were supposed to have a set of 3 matches, probably ending the feud around SummerSlam time. So could you imagine a real feud between Chyna and Lita? I am assuming that one of them should have turned heel in the process of this big rivalry, but then again, without talking about heels or faces, both of them are awesome performers, and that could have started the women's revolution because there were 2 big names in the division. Sadly, it never happened. I think it sucked the way Chyna was let go of WWE and all the drama that happened after she was fired from the company, but besides that, I think it was such a bummer that Lita and Chyna couldn't get a long rivalry. They could have put one for the ages, and they could have had a rivalry that would be cemented in the history books. Storyline number 2, and we're going to talk about another big rivalry that never happened, but this time we moved to AEW because the scrap storyline was Awesome Kong against Aja Kong. The Battle of the Kongs. So this was basically a very interesting thing because not only this has been a dream rivalry for most of wrestling fans as these 2 powerhouses dominated their respective eras, but when both of them were in AEW at the same time, people were fantasizing about this rivalry. They teased it and Fight for the Fallen 2019, but nothing happened afterwards. They had a stare down in that pay-per-view but never interacted with each other again. Even worse, that Aja Kong was never seen in AEW after that. The reason why this was cancelled was that Aja Kong got injured and had to go back to Japan while she was healing, and at the same time Awesome Kong has been a professional wrestler for over a decade by that point, had so many minor injuries, especially with her back, that she wasn't feeling well to have long ass matches. She was only there to have short participations or squash matches and just elevate the division by her star power. The big problem here was that even though AEW management wanted to have this monumental feud because it would bring lots of attention to the women's division, the women involved were not ready for... The women involved were not ready for this rivalry. There were conversations about doing this when Aja Kong healed from her injury, but then again it couldn't happen because then Awesome Kong had to shoot for Glow, and then the pandemic happened and Aja Kong is still in Japan, and Awesome Kong, we have no idea where she is. So this is one of my personal favorites from this list. I think this rivalry could have been historic. Aja Kong against Awesome Kong, two powerhouses, but at the same time both of them have wrestling skills and abilities, and they could have put a great match for the ages. We all know when we talk about big men or women in wrestling, they squash their opponents but just by doing regular moves. But these two ladies had such a great moveset and such a variety in the things they did in the ring that it was going to be worth to see the match. It was not going to be like the Great Khali against the Big Show or something like that. This was going to be a proper wrestling match. Sadly, because of injuries and then coronavirus, once again, this never happened. But that doesn't mean we cannot dream about how great this rivalry could have been. The next storyline is going to be AJ Lee and Dean Ambrose relationship. Two psychopaths, hell yeah. So I learned about this cancelled storyline just recently, probably last week, and it had such an interesting background that I am very sad it didn't happen. The storyline was supposed to go like this. Back when AJ Lee lost her spot as Raw General Manager, she was going to be sent to a mental institution, a mental facility, to get all of her mental issues corrected. And she was going to be there for a while, having different segments, but in this mental facility she was going to meet Dean Ambrose, who was another psychopath patient, and they would fall in love. The end game for this rivalry would be that AJ Lee would return to WWE along with Dean Ambrose. Now they were a couple and they would start mayhem in the whole WWE. It sounds so interesting. The reason why this storyline was cancelled, it is not confirmed. I am assuming that one of the main reasons was that they didn't want to take AJ Lee out of the product, not only in segments, they wanted her present as she was the most popular woman back then. Remember that we're talking about 2012? So it was such a big loss if she wasn't on the ring having segments and interaction with other superstars. I guess that's one of the main reasons, and if that happened, well, we wouldn't have the Shield. And despite not being the biggest fan of men wrestling, I believe the Shield is one of the greatest stables that we have had in the last decade. So maybe it was for the best. Honestly, I would have loved to see this alliance between AJ Lee and Dean Ambrose. Both of them are amazing characters. They know how to play crazy just in a perfect and smooth way, and they have always managed to have the crowd behind them. So imagine what could have happened if they were a couple and they were together causing all of this riot in WWE. I guess they would have been so popular, so over with the crowd, and probably one of the most remembered stables or couples or pairs or whatever you want to call it in recent years. It didn't happen. I guess it was for best. Then AJ Lee moved to become the longest reigning Divas champion, and Dean Ambrose debuted with the Shield later that year. But it is interesting to think what could have happened if WWE history has a twist. Storyline number 4, I'm going to move to TNA Impact, and I'm going with Christy Hemme as Knockouts champion. So I've already mentioned this storyline in my video over here, that is 10 women who should have been champions. Most of you probably remember Christy Hemme during her run in WWE, but after her rivalry with Trish Stratus and everything that she did there, she moved to TNA and improved wonders in the ring to become a very decent wrestler and have a feud with Awesome Kong. Second time we mentioned Awesome Kong in this video, queen of cancelled storylines. The thing was that Christy Hemme improved so much that they were building her as a believable threat for the Knockouts champion at the time, this dominant force Awesome Kong. And they had a title match at Final Resolution where Christy Hemme was about to win the championship. However, an interference by Raisha Saeed and Raka Khan cost her the title due to disqualification. And as you know in wrestling, when you have a DQ finish, we need a rematch. And the rematch was going to be set for a month after Final Resolution in Genesis, where Christy Hemme was reported to win the Knockouts championship then. The reason why this didn't happen is in one of the trainings that Christy had while she was preparing for her big match, she injured her neck. and doctors didn't clear her to compete the day of the pay-per-view. And that neck injury would later cause Christy Hemme to retire completely from wrestling. I think Christy Hemme is one example of women who busted their ass for this business and they were totally underrated. Everybody saw Christy Hemme as the Diva Search winner or the Playboy cover girl, and that could have been true if we only talk about her WWE run. But when it comes to TNA, she did a lot. She was one of the original knockouts. She improved way too much in the ring to be ignored. And around the time that she retired, she could have easily been a #1 contender to anyone in the division, as she was a believable threat and had the fan support as well. I'm all about giving opportunities, so I would have loved to see Christy Hemme as champion. It didn't happen due to injuries, and many of these cancelled storylines that we're right now on part number 6, most of it have been cancelled due to injuries. So it sucks when that happens, but we need to see that this is reality, that all of them are people and sometimes people get hurt. Such a shame, and I wish Christy the best. I would have loved to see her at least win one championship during her wrestling career. It didn't happen, but you will tell me down in the comments if you think Christy Hemme deserved the championship or not. To close this video, we're going to talk about the most recent storyline that was cancelled, and it was Charlotte Flair against Ripley against Bianca Belair for the NXT Women's Championship at WrestleMania 2020. This was such a controversial thing because a lot of people were expecting Bianca Belair to join Ripley and Flair in the WrestleMania match for the championship, as she was heavily involved in the rivalry, and this didn't happen. A lot of people were upset by it, and the reason why this was cancelled is because the NXT creative team was not having the same opinions as the Raw creative team, and Charlotte, despite being the NXT Women's Champion or a contender for the NXT Women's Championship, was still a Raw superstar, and they had the creative control of her character, her matches, and her direction. So it was such a mess to work with two different teams that had completely opposite opinions. It was reported that the NXT team wanted to have Bianca Belair in the match, but then it was also reported that the Raw creative team was not having any of that and they just wanted a one-on-one match between Ripley and Flair. I believe this was one of the biggest losses they could have had because Bianca Belair is such a spectacular athlete. Her in-ring skills are superior from most of the women on the roster, and she has such a unique character and makes people be behind her despite being a heel or a face, that it was such a loss not adding her to the WrestleMania match. She could have bring a lot more interest to this match because we all know the build-up to WrestleMania between Charlotte and Rhea wasn't the best. I mean, let's be honest. And Bianca could have been there to spice things up. Her personality and character were enough to stir the pot in that rivalry. It never happened, but despite being one of the biggest losses, Rhea and Charlotte managed to have one of my favorite matches of 2020 and probably one of the best matches when it comes to the women's division. And if you think about it this way, it was also reported that Bianca Belair was supposed to take the pin at WrestleMania, so maybe it was good that she wasn't involved to protect her character and make her look strong. And although fans were mad that Charlotte Flair took the title away from Ripley, I think they would have been even madder if Charlotte defeated Bianca for the championship, putting one of the strongest names in NXT division like Bianca Belair just to lose to the Queen, who wasn't even part of the brand at the time. But then again, you know, that is wrestling. I really think that the main roster creative team sucks. Most of the times they have no idea what to do, especially when it comes to women. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. It was a big loss, but then again, there are some aspects in this booking that make me glad that Bianca wasn't part of the WrestleMania match. But you will tell me down in the comments. Okay, so this will be it for the 6th part of cancel storylines. Once again, I need your opinion. Write down in the comments what did you think about each of these storylines and which ones would you have loved to see, or which ones were just okay being scrapped because they sucked. All of that is necessary in the comments, and if you have another idea of a storyline that was cancelled and that I haven't covered in this series, please leave it down in the comments as well. It's very entertaining for me to record these type of videos and to see the comments, what are your opinions on each storyline, so I really enjoy it. I also wanted to say that a like, a comment and a subscription would help me a lot with the motivation. I'm trying to close this video very fast because I don't have a lot of time today. I have a lot of work because life is a struggle and the struggle is real. So I'm Alexis, as you know. Here is my Instagram if you want to contact me or tell me anything. And this is it for this week. I will see you next week with new content. I am really trying to keep up and give you fresh content every week, but it's getting a little bit difficult, so bear with me if one week I do not post. But I will try to, don't worry. Stay safe and I will send everyone a big kiss. Goodbye!